it's Sammy here. I just wanted to encourage you today from Exodus chapter 32 and verse 1. And the context of this passage was about Moses, and he had gone up to get the 10 commandments. And we pick it up in verse 32, verse 1, and it says, chapter 32 and verse 1, and it says, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods who will go before us. Notice the moment that it seemed like Moses was taking too long up on the mountain with God, it caused the people, their lack of patience, it caused them to compromise and to sin. And what happens is they end up using their gold, and they gave it to Aaron, and he built a golden calf for them to worship. And this leads me to the point: don't let God's seeming delays cause you to compromise and sin against him. You see, notice the moment that Moses took longer than expected, the people in their impatience sinned against God by building that golden calf. And this is a common theme that we see throughout the Bible. For instance, in Genesis chapter 15, verse 5, we see the story of how God takes Abraham outside of his tent and shows him the stars and said, look up at the heavens, count the stars if indeed you can count them, so shall your offspring be. And yet, a chapter later in Genesis chapter 16 verses 1 and 2, we find that Sarai, Abram's wife, had bore him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. And so she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant, perhaps I can build a family through her. And Abram agreed to what Sarai said. Notice that back in Genesis 15, God had reminded Abraham of the promise that he would bless Abraham and Sarai from their own bodies with offspring as numerous as the stars in the sky. And yet, in a moment of weakness in Genesis 16, when it looked like God was delaying in bringing his promise, it led to a moment of compromise and sin, where Abraham now sleeps with Hagar to produce Ishmael, which wasn't part of God's promise. We also see in 1 Samuel chapter 13 and verses 8 to 12 or 8 to 13. And the context of this passage was that King Saul was in battle against the Philistine army, and the prophet Samuel had told Saul to wait for 7 days till Samuel could get there, and Samuel would offer to God the burnt offering for the battle. But we pick it up in verse 8, and this is what happens. It says, he, Saul, waited for 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. What have you done, asked Samuel. Saul replied, when I saw that the men were scattering, and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. You acted foolishly, Samuel said. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. Notice the moment that Samuel did not come at the set time, from Saul's point of view, he saw that the men were growing restless, and it led to compromise. It caused Saul to offer up the burnt offering that only the priest or prophet was meant to do to God. And he did this in order to please the men. It caused him to compromise and sin against God. And so notice the common theme in each of these passages was that impatience caused these people to compromise. And so I wanted to remind us of the importance of not letting God's seeming delays cause us to compromise and sin against God. How does this apply to us in today's age that we're living in? You know, there are so many of us as Christians who are waiting on the Lord to bring along that godly guy or girl, that godly husband or wife for each of us. And the danger can be that the moment that the Lord doesn't do it in our timing, the moment we grow older, the danger can be that because of impatience, it can cause so many of us to compromise, to then become unequally yoked, to settle for someone who's not God's best choice for us. And so can I encourage you not to give in to that compromise when it seems like God is delaying on his promise for you. Do not give in to the compromise of settling for second best or settling for disobedience to God's word. Or there might be some of you listening in whom the Lord has called you to a particular ministry to serve him in. And for whatever reason, because it seems like the Lord has delayed in opening that door of opportunity for you in that ministry, you're tempted to now settle for serving elsewhere in a different ministry, in a different calling. Can I encourage you? Don't let God's seeming delay cause you to compromise on the calling that he has and the purpose he has for you. And so my prayer for us is that in every aspect of our lives, that we wouldn't allow God's seeming delays, when it looks like he's delaying on his promise, my prayer is that we wouldn't allow that to cause us to compromise and sin against him. That we would realize that God's timing is always perfect. And he has a reason and a perfect timing when he will open that door or that opportunity in our lives. When he will fulfill what he has promised. So let us learn to persevere and keep obeying him and living for him. God bless.